you on the screen are several pictures of mission work in action. We are in a sermon series called I Am a Missionary, and these are social media posts from last week with the hashtag I Am a Missionary. We still got a few weeks left, and you are invited to do that. Make posts, and you never know what's going to show up on the screen. Last week was Youth Service Week, and I think some of those pictures are for their time together serving, and some posts from things happening here around the church. And speaking of a few weeks left in this series, when we wrap it up on August 6th, I believe, the first Sunday in August anyway, that Sunday will be a ministry and mission fair. And you are invited to dress in international costume, or if you're not up to that, you can wear your favorite mission t-shirt or your favorite shirt for a site for missions. And also we will have an international tasters feast that day. So it will be a good way to celebrate our missions and our work as a local congregation. So with this series, we are hearing from missionaries, people on the mission field, local and far away, and we are also answering questions about missionaries and missions. Who is a missionary? I am a missionary. You are a missionary. We are missionaries. Where is our mission field? Anywhere that we might find ourselves. What does a missionary do? A missionary lives as Christ, and a missionary lives for Christ. And today we examine the question, why be a missionary? I invite you to take your Bibles and turn to the 10th chapter of Romans, verses 13 through 17. Romans 10, 13 through 17. I invite you to stand for the reading of God's Word if you are able. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But how are they to call on one in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in one of whom they have not heard? And how are they to hear without someone to proclaim him? And how are they to proclaim him unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. But not all have obeyed the good news. For Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed our message? So faith comes from what is heard, and what is heard comes from the word of Christ. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Paul's letter to the Romans is a case for Christianity. He's taking it from the beginning of creation to the new covenant being opened up to the Gentiles. And that's where he is in this letter. He's talking about bringing the good news to all people. But how will the people know unless they hear? And how will they hear unless someone is sent to tell them? An important part of passing the good news and sharing the good news is the messenger. The messenger is needed in order to share the good news with others. Paul makes a clear case of the importance of the one who brings the good news to others. Thus, the answer to the question we're looking at today is quite easy to see. Why be a missionary? Paul puts it out there clearly. Unless someone is there to tell the world will not know. The world will not believe. Therefore, the missionary is essentially important. In order for the people to know that Jesus Christ is Lord, someone has to tell them. Someone has to act. God needs missionaries to go forth to a hurting and broken world. In the book Lifestyle Evangelism, Joe Aldrich writes a fictional dialogue between Jesus and the angel Gabriel. It's a story that imaginary took place in heaven after Jesus ascended to the Father. So, Jesus in heaven bore the marks of his time on earth, and he is wounded, and Gabriel says to Jesus, my Lord, you must have had a difficult time on earth. Do the people there know how much you love them and what you did for them? And Jesus said, no, not everyone. A few in Palestine know. Well, then Gabriel asked him, how will you let the people know? And to this Jesus says, well, a few know, James and John and Andrew and a few of my other followers. And they're going to tell a few more. And those people are going to tell a few more. And eventually, news of how much I love God's people and news of what I had done for them will spread all over the world. And to this, Gabriel looked a little bit skeptical, and he said, but what if they grow tired? What if the next generation forgets? Don't you have another plan? And to this, Jesus said, no, I have no other plan. I am counting on them. That really puts it in perspective for us. Jesus is counting on us. We are God's hands and feet, God's way of reaching the next generation for Christ. We are only one generation away from being a faithless people. We are one generation away from the world not knowing. The message of the good news is in our hands. We have that responsibility. We have that privilege. The scripture for today makes it vitally clear the importance of being a missionary. And this happens when we share the good news, when we proclaim about Jesus' love for others. And it also happens when we bring hope into the world, when we share love in action, when we are there for people in their brokenness, in their hurt, in their sorrow, in their pain. Anytime we bring the light of Christ to others, we have the opportunity to be a missionary. We are sharing the good news, and we pass that message on to the next generation. And as I think about sharing the good news and evangelism, I think about the importance of it today, especially in the culture we live in, and just that need to share a message that is countercultural and is a witness to the good news. I was talking with a church member not long ago, and she was sharing to me about a family friend who recently committed suicide. He had struggled with addiction for years, and he had lost his professional license. He had lost his family. He had been given chance after chance, and even in that second and third and fourth chance, he had messed up. And he saw no way out, and he was totally hopeless. Now, I believe that suicide is the result of mental illness, and just like any other illness, it drives you to a place that you wouldn't think you would go, and it is a horrible tragedy. But I was thinking about this young man and how he so needed a message of hope. And I look around us and see so many more people that need that message of hope. You know, we think we come to our end, and we think it is hopeless and there's nowhere else we have to go. But Jesus reminds us that he loves us no matter what. And in Jesus, we always have hope. In Jesus, we have more, no matter how dark it looks, no matter how bad it looks, no matter the sorrow, Jesus is always more. Because we live in a world which tells us that more is the stuff we buy, more is the stuff that we have, more work, more prestige, more social status, more fame, more notoriety, more likes on social media. That's not it. That will never fill the hole that we're searching to be filled in our lives. And there is always hope. Even when we reach that darkest night, Jesus is there. And we need people to bring hope into those situations, to be there with people in their suffering. And speaking of suffering, we need people to be missionaries to help alleviate people's suffering. Last week, I reminded you that when we serve the least of these, we serve Christ. The people who are without, who are hungry and thirsty, without adequate shelter, who are sick, who are mourning, who are struggling, who are without. Those kind of without people need us. And as we serve them, we honor Christ. So part of our work as a missionary is to alleviate the suffering of others. We become hands-on love to those in need. I'm not saying here that there won't be suffering, because there will be. Jesus said the poor will always be among us. But that doesn't mean that we cannot have the responsibility to help people in need, because let's face it, when we meet their needs, then we have an opportunity to honor Christ, and we also have an opportunity to share with them the love of Christ, because people know when we're authentic, and when we're authentic, we can better reach them. And when their basic needs are taken care of, then they are more receptive to hearing the good news. We become Jesus' love to the world. We help people who are suffering. And also, the work of a missionary is to be a kingdom builder. We have a faithful king, and we are the subjects in his kingdom. And as kingdom people, we live in this great tension of the already and the not yet. Jesus came to usher in the new covenant, and it's already here, but it is far from the ideal. We look to that ideal of a time when every knee should bow and every tongue should confess. And we look to the ideal of when there will be no suffering, no sorrow, no more tears, and no more pain. And guess what? Jesus invites us to work toward that ideal. We get to serve our King faithfully and build his kingdom. And that's part of what a missionary does too. A missionary answers the call and goes into the world to be a kingdom builder, to love Jesus and love others and get God's kingdom going. Not too long ago, Kevin and I were having a conversation in my office, and we were lamenting about how people use this phrase, I am called, to justify their actions. And I'll tell you what I mean. Wayne, our former custodian, used to always say in his denomination, which they hire pastors, that when there was a big, prestigious church with an opening for a preacher, every preacher in the district was called to be pastor of that church. But when there was a small, part-time, dysfunctional church that nobody wanted to go to, no one was called to be pastor of that church. It makes you wonder. And sometimes I believe it is easy for us to say we are called to a mission that serves self. I am called to be a missionary when it's comfortable, when it is something I can easily do, when it's about me. But the truth is, when we answer that call to be a missionary, it's part of dying to self, because it's more of Christ and less of us. More of Christ and less of us, and we have to die to self to answer the call. And to answer the call means that we put aside self to share the good news, to bring hope, to build the kingdom, to alleviate suffering, to live for the true King. And that's what it's about. We are all called, not just to cushy places and places that justify the ends for us, but we are called even to those difficult places and those places where we would rather not go. Jesus needs those in all places, because how will they know unless someone tells them and shows them? The role of the messenger is important. We just have to go, because God has called you to be a missionary, and you are important. Your work is important. So to answer the question, why be a missionary? Because God needs you to be a missionary. Because the world needs you to be a missionary. There is someone around you today that is without hope. There is someone around you today that is suffering. And we are looking for a world when every knee should bow and there is no more tears. And we need people like you to get out there and do something about it. God has called you to the mission field, and now is your opportunity to share the love of Christ. This morning, we get to hear from someone who has been called to the mission field. I don't know if you know this, but Cole Bowling will be leaving us in a few weeks. And I could say that he is going to be a nurse that in, I guess, Edinburgh, likely, Texas, and do work in Reynosa in his spare time. But I would be more honest if I said that he is going to do mission work in Reynosa and do nursing duties to support himself in his spare time. And I'm very excited about him going forth to do this. I believe the mark of a fruitful church is sending people out to work for the kingdom. And I'm very excited that Cole has answered this call. So I'm going to ask for him to come forward. He's going to share a little bit with us. And during our closing song, we're going to have the opportunity to pray him off into the work that is ahead for him.
Good morning. All right, so like Sherry said, my name's Cole Bowling, and I'm graduating nursing school in, I think, like 14 days, something like that. It's really close, and I'm really excited to be done with it. Nursing school's been the hardest thing I've ever done. But I'm here to talk to you today about what I will be doing after nursing school. I will be moving down to Mexico. I'll be living in Mexico and crossing the border to work somewhere in the Edinburgh-McAllen area. That's yet to be found out. But I'll be working in Texas to provide for myself and be able to do what I do over in Mexico. I will be raising funds for the things that we do in Mexico, which ranges from helping people with medical bills, buying food, all kinds of things, youth group kind of things, like Emily's girls group and my guys group. We have different events we do for them, and we'll help people build houses and stuff. So we'll be raising money for a lot of different things through that, but I'll be providing for myself through my education and hopefully a job that I'll get here fairly soon. But this all started when I started going with this church on a mission trip in 2014 to Mexico, and I kept going back every break I got after that. And during one of those breaks, a couple of boys I was close to on the canal, they said they wanted to spend a little extra time with me, and what could we do? And they wanted to just come play soccer, and I was like, well, it's really, because they came at like 7 in the morning. They're like, hey, we're here to hang out. And I was like, it's 7 in the morning. Like, it's really early. I said, all right, I'll cook y'all breakfast. I got them biscuits and eggs and sweet tea. They liked everything but the sweet tea. But we had breakfast, and we had a small little devotional time right there at the mission house. And then it happened again 2 days later. And then at the end of the week, there were 7 boys that wanted to have a Bible study. And so we had a Bible study, and Jonah, thankfully, was able to be a part of that time. And then in the spring, I came back again. That was in November. In the spring, I came back again for a week, and we did the same thing. We had a little Bible study, I think 3 times that week, and again, Jonah was able to help out with that week. And then I went back last summer for 2 months, and I didn't know it was going to become like a consistent thing until that summer. And they asked again, like, hey, can we have a Bible study again? I said, absolutely. And so we had Bible study 2 to 3 times a week for 2 months while I was there last summer. And that was the best time I've ever had. I didn't plan on that happening. It wasn't something that I went into saying, like, oh, this is going to be exactly what I do. It's just, it formed that way. I actually told Kevin when I was in youth, I was like, I never want to be a youth pastor. I don't want to do that. That's what I get for saying that. So, but it's become something that I've become very passionate about, and I love it a lot. But I'll be moving August 8th. I'm staying for the missions day and stuff, and after I get down there, I plan on having a newsletter of some form. I haven't made it yet, so I don't have the information yet. But the church will pass it along to all of y'all, and if you'd like to stay a part of that and keep receiving that, I'll have a way that you can register to get that newsletter every month. But I wanted to end by thanking all of you. This church has been a huge blessing on my life for 6-7 years now, And I came here when I was 15 and started going to youth. And each and every one of you have been a huge part in helping me get to where I am today, and I want to thank y'all for that, and I'll forever be grateful. Thank you.